Welcome to another episode of Michigan Tech's Husky Hour. In this episode of Husky Hour, Dayna and a panel of guests discuss everything emotions, including recognizing emotions you may be feeling, owning your emotions, and processing your emotions in a healthy manner. Enjoy!
Welcome to Husky Hour. I'm Dayna Browning. I'm the Assistant Director for Education and Outreach at the Center for Student Mental Health and Wellbeing. We're going to be talking about knowing and owning emotions.
Hi, I'm Beth. I'm an intern with the Center for Student Mental Health and Wellbeing.
Hi, my name is Christine Putz, and I'm the Assistant Director of Dial Help.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kelly Garrison. I am a new therapist at the Center for Student Health and Wellbeing.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sean Brown. I'm a Residence Education Coordinator over in Residence Education Housing Services. I specifically work with DHH.
Hi, I'm Yasasya Bhattacharya. I'm representing GST.
So I guess we want to kind of start off by talking about recognizing emotions in yourself. What are some ways to kind of recognize your emotions? Is there any methods you can kind of go through to just sit there and say, hey, I'm feeling this, and just owning up to it? What are some tips to recognizing what you're feeling?
I think one of the biggest things that you can do in helping to recognize your emotions is to really just sit back and listen to what your body's telling you. I think it's one of your biggest indicators. So you're going to have a lot of physical things that are happening depending on your emotions, good and bad. And I think that that's going to be a person's best guide to kind of figuring out where they're at. For example, feeling anxiety, you might feel jittery, have sweaty palms, might do faster breathing. It might be a little feeling like you're out of breath, those kinds of things. And those can be really good indicators of okay, I'm not feeling my best right now. Let me take a step back, give myself a break, that kind of thing, and help to regroup. So I think if you really just give yourself a minute, take some perspective, and just listen to your body and what sensations you're experiencing, that's a good start at least.
I think it's really easy to rush from thing to thing to thing to thing and never just stop and take a second to recognize what you're feeling. I did this for years. I've fallen off it a little bit because I had a baby recently and it makes life a little challenging. But something I did was literally at the end of the day, just sitting down and kind of jotting down some things that happened. I think some people do it as a gratitude of here's the things I'm thankful for at the end of the day. Some people use it as kind of a worry piece of here's the things that are on my mind. I'm going to try and put them in the book, close it for the night. But I think you can, in some way, shape, or form, blocking off a time at the end of the day to just kind of sit down and see how you're feeling. It'd be nice to be able to do it throughout the day, but sometimes that doesn't work. And so, because once you start noticing habits, so I have a bunch of tests this week, or whatever is causing me to feel this specific emotion, you can start looking to build in pieces to help kind of say, okay, when I know I have this coming up, I can do these things to help, de-stress me, help me to manage my frustration, my anger, my whatever emotion you're feeling. Once you've noticed when you have things that will kind of trigger that.
So Sean mentioned kind of taking that time at the end of the day. Do you think, and you did mention this briefly, if you have time throughout the day to kind of recognize your emotions, do you think it's important to do that when you can, to kind of say, this is how I'm feeling?
Yeah, I mean, I find it really important, and it's hard for me to prioritize it. I think that's the thing that I struggle with the most is, like Sean, I have little ones at home, and I'm sure, whether it's little ones or schoolwork or dissertation or whatever it is, it's always easy to have something else. And it's not until I have these moments of calm, or I'm doing meditation or mindfulness thing, or even my husband the other day was you should take a Saturday and just go do something for yourself. And I literally started crying. And then I was oh, wow, I have a lot of built up stress here that I didn't realize was there. And so I think, I can't say that I'm a wonderful practitioner of always prioritizing this, but sometimes emotions sneak up on me like that. And I know what will help, but I don't know, I just know that I need to prioritize it more, I guess, is what I'm saying.
I think that's something too that's really common, is to wait until things have completely snowballed to a point where they're totally out of control. And then you're at this point of okay, now I can't focus on anything. And I feel I have lost control of multiple aspects of life, and I can't function. And that's when you decide okay, I need to do something about this. But then it's one more thing on your plate now to how am I going to cope with this? How do I need, what do I need to do to kind of get back to my baseline here? And it's hard to do it at that point. So I think going back to what was discussed a few minutes ago about doing those little check-ins with yourself and just seeing where you're at so you can regroup and recollect before it snowballs and gets completely out of control.
I think it's something to start small on. Like, I think, building in, because this is such an alien practice to some people, if you've never done stuff like this, sometimes it has to be, I just felt this really strong emotion. I need to take a step back and ask myself why. And I think when you really boil down, I think this will come up a little bit later, but when you really boil down, why am I feeling this way? Okay, if this is stressing me out, what's causing me the stress from this? And you sometimes have to kind of work back, and you can essentially even just kind of map it out on a piece of paper of what are the stressors that are causing me to feel like this? Because it could be this tiny thing up here. Maybe you got, a bad grade in an assignment, and it's, just really caused you just kind of whoa. And if you backtrack it, there's something a lot further down the line that's kind of that root of that stress. And really taking that time in small increments when you start noticing it can really help kind of create some of these as habits, because it is hard to develop these just off the bat and be like, cool, I'm going to manage my emotions like a pro now. It takes some time and practice.
Yeah, I agree with that too as well. So usually what I would do is when I feel down or something, I would write my diary. So there I can identify when something went wrong and how can I make amendments to that. How can I remedy that?
I think sometimes it's really helpful to talk to somebody else, to reach out. Don't feel like you need to always do it alone, especially if you have experienced a lot of trauma in your life. And if you're triggered, it can really make it harder to process your emotions and your feelings. And I'm not just saying it because I represent the crisis line in our area. This could be reaching out to Kelly in counseling or Sean or any of the great people here too. But sitting down with someone and taking some time and really genuinely talking about how you're feeling and what's going on for you can help you bounce it off someone else. And that other person who's a little more neutral might be able to give you a little perspective and say, it really sounds like you're feeling this. And maybe you thought it was anger, but really maybe it's sadness, maybe it's fear, something like that. And, somebody who might help you make a safety plan. Okay, well, when you're feeling like this, what can we do to help? Who can we bring in to help you and things like that? So that can be really helpful. Don't always feel like you need to go it alone, but it is important, like everyone else said, though, also to take some time during the day and check in with yourself. I'm starting to feel more anxious. What might be going on? But remember, there's people who are here to help you.
I think that's a good point, and perhaps that's the answer that nobody wants to hear is it takes more time for everything. Because I've just been kind of thinking, we've been talking a lot about stress and the personal kind of taking it on ourselves emotions, but you brought up anger or frustration. I think are probably emotions that students, or us, we don't know how to deal with. You have somebody in your group that you've been assigned to work with and they're not doing anything, it's really easy to be angry about it. Or I used to teach middle school, so I had students who did ridiculous things and I would be actually kind of angry about it, but my best thing was go out in the hall. I'm going to come out when I'm ready to deal with this, and then we can talk about it, because I needed the time to calm down too. And I think it's great to have somebody to process it with too. Hey, my group member isn't working with me. I'm angry every time I talk to them. I just end up yelling at them or blaming them or sending them a nasty text. How can I actually process my emotion and have a healthy conversation?
You guys think that people often experience multiple emotions at once, not strictly anger, not strictly stress or happiness? Do you think that there's often more than one emotion at play when things happen?
I think that you can experience a lot of different emotions at once. And I think, I actually just had this conversation today. A lot of times, anger is kind of a default emotion. I think it's for a lot of reasons. It's easier to express that and saying okay, well, I'm really mad about this, instead of being more vulnerable and telling somebody okay, I was really hurt when you said this, or, I was embarrassed or I was confused. If it can come out as anger, it's a little bit easier to express. So I think with that, when you're going through a situation, it brings up a lot of different emotions. And I think you kind of process through each of them in a certain way. And I think just going back to what Christine said about just working with somebody else to kind of bounce things off of and really talk it through can help kind of clarify of like, okay, well, maybe I wasn't necessarily angry, but it was more so that I was, you know, really hurt my feelings when you said this, and I didn't want to say that I was embarrassed about it or something like that. Can help us to realize more of what we're actually feeling, and also help work with the person that was involved in it to kind of just, again, like process it, bounce it off of. And so, yeah, to answer that, yeah, I think you can experience a couple different emotions all at once.
Kelly had mentioned that, you know, sometimes someone might like just default to anger. Do you think that there are some emotions that are easier or just come quicker to people than others?
I think it's all about what you've used to kind of process through things in the past, because I think you have emotion as a reaction to something. And if that emotion has gotten you through it, you know, maybe that was like, if you would do you to do better, or, you know, if you've never, I guess, kind of caught yourself and tried to work through some of those more unhealthy emotions, that's the mechanism you have developed in response to, like, you know, some sort of like stressor and stuff. And I think, you know, emotions are so unique to every person that people show it and feel it in different ways. But I think in a lot of cases, like, we have this image in our head of what anger looks like, and it can be a mix of other things and combination of anger. But anger is the thing that we kind of like associate that response with. So yeah, I guess like in short, yes, I think people feel anger, or like feel multiple emotions at once. And I think a lot of it's based on what's worked for them in the past or what has become habit for them. And so it's sometimes needing to break those habits.
Kelly made an excellent point that it's very easy to show anger. Like, I'm so mad about this and I'm so upset about that. So I think that that's definitely something people, or at least in my experience, that people go to really quickly. And it almost always is, there's something else behind it, some sort of hurt or memory that it triggered something in them. And it was just easier to show anger than be vulnerable.
What are some of like the basic coping strategies that you know, people have? We've talked about all these emotions and like you need time, but sometimes time isn't there for us, or we're in the middle of a situation and we can't go talk to somebody else. What are some other good coping methods that students can use?
I think the easiest ones to do like in the moment are more of the like deep breathing things. So there's a lot of different techniques for deep breathing that you can do, and to do them in ways where people don't necessarily realize that that's what you're doing, instead of standing in front of somebody and taking massive, deep, long breaths and drawing attention to yourself. There's more inconspicuous ways to do it, and there's a lot of resources for that kind of stuff online. But I think in the moment, that's something that's really helpful. It just gives you a reset. It calms everything down for you. It's allowing you that time to take a step back and recollect yourself without actually taking a lot of time to do it, if that makes sense. And any kind of grounding kind of technique like that, even just something to kind of get you out of that moment. You know, even looking around the room and just telling yourself to identify like 5 different things, just something to kind of get your mind off of it, do a little mental reset, and just gives you that time and that space to take you out of that moment, get yourself out of your head and get some perspective.
Are there times when it's more, I guess, appropriate to act on an emotion versus times where you should sit and think about what you're feeling? Or do you think that it's just a general rule that before, you know, reacting, you should sit and think about what you're feeling and why you're feeling that way?
I'd say that no emotion is inherently bad or good. I think that, you know, if you see someone having physical pain, or, you know, any, like, not just physical, like any sort of pain, it's not bad to get mad. Like, that's, you know, that is something that might cause a like I am upset for this person. I think that you said it exactly. I think I think it's taking that time to assess, why am I mad? Like, what's kind of the root of this anger, and where is this directed? And I think, you know, that is something, I guess, in response to kind of your last question of this coping mechanism, I think it's having those people to talk things through is incredibly important. That's been brought up a couple of times now, but having people to kind of like essentially just bounce ideas off of, whether it's, you know, a counselor, whether it's a friend, to just talk through how you're feeling. We don't talk about emotions that much, and I think it's something that we really should aim to do more often.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've always heard like the rule of thumb is that you shouldn't bottle things up and get them out. But we had a conversation for Husky Hour last week about difficult conversations. And I now have my caveat with that is great words from Kelly Raffelli, our director of CDI, that make sure you're in a safe place to do that. So there are appropriate times to show your emotion, and we probably do need to show a lot more of it and let it out more. But there are definitely times where you shouldn't be showing that emotion, or it'd be inappropriate to show that, or unsafe. You know, at work, it might be inappropriate for you to, if you work with your spouse even, it might be inappropriate to show how much you love that spouse, or dating a coworker, right? Those are all good emotions, but they could be really bad in a certain situation. And then, you know, on the flip side, if you're, you know, we've got lots of different protests going on in our country these days, and, you know, there are definitely unsafe places that if you show your emotion for or against something very strongly, you might be putting yourself in a risky spot. So, you know, I definitely want to mention that, and shout out to Kelly for fully forming that in my brain.
So there seems like there's kind of, you know, a line between sitting with your emotions and processing them versus completely bottling them up. And we kind of talked about this at the beginning about the effects that can have on someone. But what are some of those, like not specific, but I guess things that can happen if you don't like own up to your emotions, you don't recognize your emotions, you keep them bottled inside, you don't talk to someone about them?
I think that can lead to one of those situations like I talked about earlier, where if it's like anxiety or stress or something like that, things can really snowball on you, and then it's just going to contribute even more so. So the anxiety and the stress and feeling overwhelmed is just going to continue to get worse. And at that point, it makes it a lot harder to actually address the root of that problem and actually take a step back and be able to come up with a realistic solution on how to kind of get back to your norm. And in other realms, like in terms of anger and like dealing with conflict, I think, you know, I go back to thinking about like roommate situations where it was really uncomfortable to tell your roommate, like, hey, I don't want 7 people in my room at 4 o'clock in the morning the day before midterms. It can be an uncomfortable situation, but if that kind of stuff keeps happening over time and you keep putting it off, it's going to be like one thing that comes up, and it's going to be the most minor thing. Like they took your fruit snacks out of your drawer, and you're just going to like flip your lid, and it's just not a healthy way to react. And at that point, you don't really have much control over what's going on. And I think that's where you can come into situations where it's a lot harder to come back from, because you didn't give yourself the ability to like really think through a situation. You just reacted with a lot of strong emotions. So if you can come up with a way to address those kinds of things over a period of time so that they don't bottle up, then you can hopefully prevent a bigger situation from happening down the road.
Yeah, I agree. I think, you know, being preventative things are always best. So if you can prevent some of the worst situations, or, you know, sometimes you just can't, like you have a horrible boss that you're just going to be angry and frustrated with a lot. Like it doesn't help to bottle it up and not do anything about it. It probably also doesn't help to confront your boss about being, you know, an idiot or whatever you think they are. And, you know, but it does help to think about, what are the things that I can control and what are the things that I can't control? I can control how I react to this. And, you know, I can control how I plan to react to things in the future. And I think that's just a really helpful exercise of like, list out like, what can I control? What can't I control? And then focus on the things that you can. I think sometimes we spend too much time focusing on the things that we can't, and like getting lost in that spiral.
It was touched on that, you know, no emotion is labeled good or bad. We feel what we feel. Do you think that is there any, I don't know, like quick fix to accepting these emotions, even if we label them as good or bad? Someone might think that feeling happy is a good emotion and feeling anger is a bad emotion, so they might kind of shy away from labeling that emotion as anger. Is there anything that they can do, or do you think it's just a time and a practice kind of thing?
Thinking about mindfulness practices, actually a really good mindfulness meditation is labeling thoughts and feelings. And so sitting with yourself and just breathing normally, maybe closing your eyes, and as thoughts come into your mind, you can label them. And I do this in 2 different kinds of exercises. One where we label the type of thought that we're having, like planning, thinking, reflecting, and then another one where we label the emotions that we're having. So like judging, or, you know, I'm feeling sad about this. And those can be really overwhelming, but actually giving them the names of those really allows people to let them go a little bit more easily. And that thought might keep coming up and you might have to keep labeling it, but labeling thoughts, and so giving it the name of saying, yes, this is anger, often starts to de-escalate that, because we know what it is. And when we can define something, we don't also have that sub feeling of the fear of the unknown added in there.
And just to throw this out there, there's a lot of great mindfulness resources on the tech website, as well as just in general online videos, meditation, all of that stuff. There's tons of resources out there if anybody's interested in that.
Husky Hour is brought to you by the Center for Student Mental Health and Wellbeing. Visit mtu.edu/well-being for more information about programs, events, and workshops. Thanks for listening.